show goes on if he decides to join us. So today we're going to be discussing the hot topic, topic of money in the church. We're talking about tithing. We're talking about, donations. We're talking about join this line for the $100 prophecy, $1,000 prophecy, and all of the crazy mix that comes in between. So before we get into that, my one presenter who actually made it to the show today, Corey. Conk, what's going on, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm here. I'm physically alive, and I'm emotionally ready to make fun of prosperity gospel.
Yes, that is everybody's job pretty much today. You want to update people of where you're at, and because you did mention that you were in the process of moving. Is that going smoothly?
Yep. I mean, so far so good on the house. I was expecting something crazy to happen, but so far something crazy has not happened. So
good.
I don't know if that makes me more nervous that it's going to get worse right before the deadline or not, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm closing July 28th, so I'm just biding my time until then, and then I got to go give somebody $8,300. So
good time.
And then I get a house.
Congratulations. Yeah. I mean, you're not the only one who's had a new place. I am coming to you broadcasting from my new place out in Wales. So I know some of our viewers and listeners, they've been following along, and yeah, I've completed the move. This is my new layout. At some point, I'll probably do like a good walkthrough tour. I got to figure out the acoustics and the lighting a little bit, because it gets dark very early here, come to the winter period. And I've only got like small track lighting up above. So I got to figure that out. So I might have to get some box lighting, but the mess you see behind me is me still unpacking. And I've just got boxes and boxes of stuff to kind of clear out. But I'm in Wales, and I'm loving my time out here. It's pretty awesome, actually.
Awesome. Have you seen any actual whales, though? That's the real question. Or is it false advertising?
A couple of them walking around. Yeah, it's kind of ugly.
Are they going in herds or what? Are they going?
Is it a herd of whales or a school? I don't know.
Squad? Something like that. A pod. I think that's it. Whale pod.
That's it. Whale pod. That's it. Yeah, they've had a couple of pods. It's very funny because I'm out in the valleys, which is like the real country part. Wales is already kind of sheep country. There are more sheep in Wales than there are people. And I can look around here and see that some ancestor many, many centuries ago was having a very good time, and his genes have survived for like hundreds of years. A lot of them look the same. So, geez. Yeah, it's like another Genghis. It's like the Wales version of Genghis Khan. yeah. What is it? Genghis had thousands of kids, and we all kind of have like descendancy to him. There's something like that happening out here in Wales, and it's sometimes it's noticeable. Like you could just see the features are the same to everybody you talk to. So some ancestors having a very, very good time.
Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of that in Missouri because it's a little redneck. It's like the physically northernmost southern state.
Northernmost southern state, yeah.
You see a lot of people that look alike, but that's mostly probably fetal alcohol syndrome. So I don't know if it's genetics, but that happens a lot here. Unfortunately,
we do know that it happens and stuff like that. But without delay, let's kind of like jump in a little bit to the topic. We were hoping that our friend Amos will join us, hopefully when he gets up, however long that would be. So Corey, it's you and me, man. Like I know both of us have had kind of experiences behind the curtain in the ministry world. Do you have any spicy stories when it comes to finances in the church?
Oh boy, I think I shared this months ago, but yeah, I was part of an internship, in as many air quotes as I can, internship, where essentially they this is just something I've noticed in a lot of ministries is if you can't pay your employees, call them an intern saying they get paid in sacrifice to God.
Volunteer hours or something,
and I was working 80 hours a week on average for that internship, and we didn't get paid, but we got a $1,000 a month stipend that was also taxed, so it was really $800.
Oh, dang, that's. I mean, explain a little briefly about the U.S. because I was talking to Amos about this. Do you all have like a basic allowance that you're not taxed on, and then you're taxed, or how does that work exactly? Is there, or everything is taxed regardless?
It feels like everything's taxed regardless. I don't know the finicky rules, but I know the government keeps taking my money. That's all I know.
That's about the best anyone could expect.
Yeah, it's like a mob extortion, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. We're not going to bust your kneecaps if you pay us this money.
Yeah, exactly. They have a monopoly on force, right?
Well, in theory, but we'll save that for another show.
Okay.
But yeah, in terms of, I've seen, I mean, even when I was building up one of these ministries, I volunteered. I can't even count the hours. You know, we used to show up for a service probably about, I don't know, 4:00 in the afternoon, and I would not leave that service sometimes until 4 a.m. in the morning. It's like 12 hours at a time. Forget Saturdays. We did all the, casting out devils for like 12 and 13, 14 hours. It was just nonsense.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there is an indentured type of thing that goes on. Now, I'll have to admit, the church that I was involved in, they did not preach tithing, which is something we can probably, kind of touch on.
For the whole hour and a half, I could touch on that.
Yeah. I mean, this is a big topic. I figure we're going to do a couple of continuations. So they definitely stressed grace giving. Like, if you want to give, give. If you don't want to give, it's all cool. And the leader of the church was very fortunate. He had a business, and that kind of just paid for the church. So we didn't see that. However, we did have one gentleman who was making some pretty decent money. And, he would make, some pretty sizable donations to the church. But at the same time, that man was just living an absolute reprobate life. Just, running through young girls. He was involved in all kind of underhanded kind of criminal activity. He was kind of an investigator sort of thing. So he had all these connections in the underworld and, political backhandling and stuff like that. One sketchy guy. And what we would notice, I don't know if my friend Terrence is in the chat, but he would know the details of this, but we would notice this, that when it came to the leadership and, you go up for prayer or whatever the case might be, the leadership would always pick on the young people, and he'd be like, oh, you're sinning your life and this, that, and the other, and you got to clean your life up. But when he'd pray for this guy, this guy always had God's vision in mind. This guy had vision, and he was on track to do great things for the Lord. And we knew it came down to the money. This guy was making massive contributions, and apparently the Lord was very pleased with that.
Oh, good. How convenient. Those are just coincidences. They're totally not correlated, right?
Total coincidence. Yeah. Doesn't mind that he's paying like half the church budget. This is circumstantial.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's funny how they always kind of like fudge around it, beat around the bush for it. Where like it's really obvious that they're trying to preach, oh yeah, we're doing this for the Lord, we're all going to be good servants, how much do you love God? Do you want to save these kids? Yada, yada, yada. But a lot of it is to dodge employee loss. Like, that's what my thing is like, to me, it was brutally obvious, but those kind of people that sign up for those jobs are also young, right? They're usually fresh out of high school or fresh out of college, from my experience.
Yes.
Getting in those extreme internship jobs where they don't really understand the workforce and how it works, right? Of like that you can work half this and get paid triple, but then you wouldn't be serving the Lord. Yeah. And like it's like so obvious they're trying to go with that. And I mean, like, I don't remember anywhere in the Bible in Acts or anything like that where Paul said, now go start a 503c church, not organizational profit. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just so funny how our concept of church and ministry and service right now kind of revolves around beating around the bush that we don't want to pay the government a lot of stuff.
Correct.
I don't know if you agree with that at all or not. But
Oh no,
yeah.
I completely agree. In fact, who's this guy? L. Ron Hubbard. He was a Scientology guy, was he? I can't remember.
Yeah, L. Ron Hubbard was Dianetics, and then created
Dianetics.
Scientology off of that. Yeah.
Thank you. And a very big part of what he started that whole thing on was the tax break of forming his own religion. So if you read kind of a little bit of the history and stuff like that, that was definitely a motivating factor. The Church of Pasta, like Linguini, Italian pasta, that's another one. The Church of Cannabis, that's another one. There are a lot of these spicy religions that are taking, quote unquote religions that are trying to take advantage of the tax law. So I completely concede that point. And to be honest, I should probably pursue that, because I am an ordained minister. I could register my ministry out here in the UK and like filter donations and stuff like that. But I actually do believe in that the church should be paying taxes. I don't know if you agree with that or not. Like, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings on it.
Of course.
Because, I don't think they should be excused just because they're a church. Like, in the idealism, I think either there should be no taxes, which would be awesome. But exactly. How it is now, like, sure, pay taxes like everyone else. But I also have this feeling of the more individual side, like the micro scale instead of the macro scale of, man, take what you can get from the government because they're going to take it all anyway, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of that shrewdness that I was talking about 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you can get a tax break, why wouldn't you take it, right?
Oh, no, so, I completely, I think it's every person's, we're not going into a tax show, but I think morally we should allow the government to steal as little money from us as possible legally. So I am completely in whatever kind of legal loopholes or provisions, discounts, whatever, pursue it to the full extent of the law. I'm totally on board with that. Where I have a concern, and this is, again, because I traveled, I did the whole evangelistic circle. I've seen all of the different churches. I've seen behind the scenes of what goes on. And I mean, some of these, not everybody's got an issue. Oh, our man in the wilderness has just joined us. What's up, Amos? Can you hear us?
Yeah, if you check your messages, you'd see why I'm here.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't. Oh, there's power out in. Oh no, man.
Good morning.
So are you sticking around or what you doing?
I can do the show today, right now.
All right, cool. So we're just touching on the issue of taxes in the church, and we all kind of agree that, it's our legal obligation to try and pay as little tax or to be robbed as little as possible.
Right.
And I was just getting into the fact that I've seen some pretty monstrous ministries, built on the backs of very, very poor people. And most of that money is not going to missions. It's not going to help the poor or the community. It's going into the pockets of the pastor and his family. And that definitely kind of irks me the wrong way. I don't know. I mean, Amos, if you want to kind of fill us in on some of your stories that you may have seen behind the scenes when it comes to the church and money.
Oh, yeah. The fact that when it comes down to it, everyone's out for themselves, money-wise.
Sure. If you have a story about that.
I mean, I would say in the past, for a lot of the efforts that I feel that I had put in with ministry myself, working with a lot of different people through the years, I didn't really get paid that much, if any.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Conk was just sharing his similar take on that,
Yeah, you're doing it for the Lord, right?
Yeah, and there were moments where there was definitely like overwhelming generosity that could have been tapped upon to, help out the guys who were volunteering, interning, giving their time, and you would see that. And then that the money would kind of pass you by and go to someone else, and there you were, half a paycheck left or something, and then yeah, I'm just doing it for the Lord, man.
Yeah. Did they ever also quote you of like, if you're a servant or you're responsible in the small things, then God will give you bigger things.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, you'll have a nice life later, but not while you're here because we're not going to pay you enough.
Oh, it was. I mean, different moments. It wasn't even like if it was small things. It was like, I was already side by side with people, speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were moments when it's just like, oh yeah, I'm side by side with you, having the same podium, the same stand to speak, and then but I'm not going to get anything, and it's like you want to try not to be that guy that's like, why am I not getting paid for this? But the more and more that I started to like with us with the red pill and valuing our own time, you definitely kind of would see like, oh, my time is obviously valuable. Like if I'm doing the same kind of thing as someone else at an event or I'm performing some sort of service, my time should be valued in some way.
Yeah.
But and there's there can be a huge discrepancy for that, at least for church, where you can have you're traveling, you're going with people, and you're putting in just as much effort, offering just as much of a you're feeding the same flock the same amount of food, and yet you're not really getting paid for it. But I don't want to get too into what I'm really thinking about that.
I mean, Corey, when it came to, maybe outline your position on how you think the church should be dealing with money, and, throw in your 2 cents on tithing. We could probably kind of start going down that road a little bit.
Oh yeah. So first of all, I don't agree that it's a 503c. Like you don't see that in church, or you don't see that in the Book of Acts or anything like that in the early church. They weren't some kind of like official, organized, structured business, right? Which is essentially what it is now. And so, yeah. And if we're looking at those, they mostly just, gave what they felt like they wanted to give, and they helped who they felt like they wanted to help, and there was no government involvement at all. If anything, the government was still trying to kill them. So, it's a very different life. You know what I mean? When you instead of getting the officially approved state church and state religion that's all got its boxes checked and its paperwork filled out, right?
Yeah,
I think those are really huge different things. And like, I mean, most of the churches didn't even have buildings, right? They would all just like meet somewhere and hang out, right?
Yeah, in the house. Yeah.
Yeah, but so it's so funny how that's changed so much over time, and how like people don't even think about that right now. When you hear the word church, you think of, oh, that building down the street that's filled with a bunch of old ladies, fighting for power because they don't pay taxes, right? It's so funny looking at those two together, and I just don't get why people don't question that at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it becomes very much like a social club, especially out here in England. Like if you're part of Church of England, that's like a social thing. You're with the royals, and it's the elite kind of religion sort of thing that goes on. That's a very new concept to me. I didn't know that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I think we'd all agree that the church is people. Right, the body of believers is what defines the church. It is not an institution. I mean, I wish our brother Bobby was here. We would have had a fascinating conversation about that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I agree with your sentiment. And now what ends up happening, and this is my concern as well, when you do have a building, you are now a slave to the building. Like you've got to upkeep it. You've got to turn the lights on and run the coffee shop, and that all takes money. Even if you're, if you're,
where's it coming from?
Yeah, it's coming from the people, So, I mean, how do you think the church should go about the congregation? And do you have like an idea of church structure that you think, is more biblical?
Well, first of all, stop having buildings. I think that one's really easy. But it's very interesting, and I'm going to try to not be Dave Ramsey here, but I think a lot of it has to, like the financial pressures and debt, right? It really changes your mindset on everything, right? Like I'm severely against tithing, right? Where you're essentially guilt tripping your congregation to paying the bills. Mm-hmm. And the only reason we're in that part right now is because the church is now okay with debt, right? Yes. It's okay with signing the dotted line, owing a bunch of money, and then asking everyone to pay it off for you because of this decision I made, right? And the more money you need, the more you kind of have to preach about it, and you'll even give a Sunday sermon about how good it is to give and tithe. And to me, that's so manipulative every time I see it, because they're not saying, like, everybody knows they can give money away, right? It's no new magical revelation that you're allowed to give money to charity, to churches or other places, right? It's not like some deep spiritual wisdom. Everyone does it, even non-Christians, right? But the fact that they have to keep having those sermons and keep reminding people and have a bulletin board of all the stuff they need to buy and all the stuff they need to pay off, constantly like poking and prodding, hey, you don't have to, but it's really cool if you give money, right? Yeah. It just keeps happening over and over again because right now we're okay with debt. And I don't think we should be, even though I hate the word should. But that's kind of my whole thing. What about you, Amos? How do you feel about debt and tithing?
Oh, 10%. You have to pay 10% before taxes hit your check.
Gross. Yeah. It's got to be gross income.
Yeah, they got to take that extra $30. Every penny counts for the Lord.
It was if I think back enough, and I can remember the sermon that was given to me as a kid in high school. And I'm like, is this, you gotta think about it and realize that it's some type of indoctrination to be like, so, kids, if you really think about it, like, do you guys know what FICA is? I'm like, I'm learning more about freaking how pay stubs are done and paychecks are done in a church than I would in school. And they're like, FICA, that's this and that and the other, and there's Medicare and Social Security and all this, and that goes to the government when you get paid, but we got to remember that 10% goes to God first. I'm like, oh, okay, Mr. Pastor, and then you realize, you look back at it now and you're like, oh, I owe you that. I even had a pastor, same church, in the so this is in youth ministry. I'm being lectured and taught about taxes and paying gross out of my gross income instead of my
in youth ministry,
net income. And then I have the pastor over in the the main service, who weekly would display the weekly income report.
Really?
He goes, in order to maintain, in order to either grow or exceed our current budget requirements, we need to raise a monthly amount of this. In order to maintain our current operations, we need to raise this. And this is what we received last week.
Really? That was out in the open?
That was, displayed on the monitors, and
no pressure.
Yeah. And then what is it now? Did you guys ever have like a summer revival?
Sorry, a what?
A summer revival kind of thing. Like during the summer, there was always some sort of event.
Yeah,
more speakers.
Yeah, at one of the
But
churches I worked at, it was always right before school started. It was like the last week or 2 weeks before summer vacation ended, right?
You know why that is, right?
Is that when they're in the red the most?
Exactly.
Pro, yeah,
Financially. So they get in a lot of past, a lot of guest speakers, just a lot of events. They try to make it, faith filled power weekend, month, whatever. And they just get a bunch of big names. I'll just say this. I mean, that was the month Kenneth Copeland came to that church. Um,
right.
yeah.
and
First private jet, right?
well, we didn't know too much about that stuff back then, but that was when people of his level of notoriety in the church would show up, and they, of course, pump out a whole bunch of money because of all the people that'll be coming. Because during the months of summer, that's when people are going on vacations or doing all this other stuff, and so they're not going to be tithing as much. They're not going to be giving as much. You can't rely on your people that are automatically tied into the church. It's so your guests, your all this are just not coming. So uh, yeah, all of that happened to my church. So
Yeah, it's almost like it's almost like a Save Africa charity live stream, but for the church, right?
What do they call it? A praise-a-thon or something like that? That's kind of the lingo.
yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
I mean,
But they mask it heavily in spiritual words like the revival. Oh yeah, we're gonna get new spirits and more people coming to the Lord, and maybe those people will bring a checkbook. You know what I mean? So it's ridiculous how it's all peer pressured and like veiled as sincerity, but they know there's a bottom line at the end of the day, and to me that's like repulsive.
I remember in middle school when we would have tithes and offerings and stuff for that, like kids would bring their money and give and stuff. Obviously there's no envelopes, there's no way of tracking that. Not like in the main service where you'd have like a proper way they could actually send you, tax deductible stuff and all that. But yeah, I'd be giving, and I had this feeling like, oh, if I gave a lot, because we were kind of like a prosperity gospel type church,
Oh
and
boy.
huh?
Oh boy.
Oh yeah, if you gave a lot, it means something. So there I was, middle school and high school and stuff, being lectured all this, and I believe like, oh, if I gave like obviously more than 10%, then I'd probably be blessed more, right?
In theory, that's how the theory goes. Obviously,
Yeah. So I mean, I like actually there was always the tithing message that someone would give. One of the leaders or youth leaders would go up there and talk about blessings and whatever. And they said, because we're supposed to give 10%, and I blurted out 50%.
really.
Yeah,
Did
I
somebody
was.
point at
I
you and
was.
say, "This young man gets the vision"?
Yeah, something like that.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And I would actually like. And what was interesting was my parents. They would ask me like, "Didn't we give you money, or didn't you like, Because I there was times when I was only working odd jobs as a kid making money, and I'd tell them what money I'd make, and one day they're like, "Where'd all your money go? Like, how did you spend all your money?" And I'm like, "I tithed it." And then my mom would like, "Well, we can't get mad at you for that." And it was the truth in terms of I actually did give it to the church, but then I'm now looking back, I'm like, no, actually you should have called me out. Like you
Yeah.
should get on my ass about that, because no, like you don't like that's not a good habit. That's not a good thing to be teaching your kids. Like if you care about church, like genuinely care, sure, give. But
Yes.
to the where I was and the way the church was teaching it at the time, and obviously probably continues to teach it that way, um, is I have to give, and if you have kids that are giving away their income, you have what was it? I mean, what are they saying now? Like, you're supposed to still be giving during COVID, and I mean, states are putting a hold on, foreclosures and evictions, and bills are being halted, but you still got to give to God.
Yep.
It's kind of like when people are literally starving and dying. I mean, granted, not as crazy as things could be, but there's definitely that going on. You're really going to preach at them that they need to give?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's how you know it's become a business at the end of the day. And
yeah,
I mean, you ask any lay person on the streets about Christianity and stuff like that, and it's always going to be, like you say, the Kenneth Copeland. It's going to be what Olstein. It's going to be these mega church, places that all believe in this. You got to give money. You got to give money, and it's a huge spectacle at the end of the day. And I mean, just briefly on my position, I don't believe that tithing is a new covenant. Something that Christians should be indulging in this day and age. A lot of people point back to Abraham tithed to Melchizedek, and he's tithed once with the spoils of war. It wasn't even his money; it was what he took from what was it, the liberation from Salem, where he took his cousin out, and he did it once, and that was kind of it. So if you want to point to that as some kind of new covenant theology, if you get a windfall, if you get like a big inheritance, it's not yours, and you want to give a portion of that to the church, that would kind of be the theology. And the other one a lot of people point to is in the book of Acts, of course, where they're being instructed to sell the land and give everything to the church kind of thing. And again, the context of that has a lot to do with the coming destruction of Jerusalem. The Jews were selling land. That sounds controversial enough as it is, but the whole purpose of the fact that they were selling the land is because they knew the Romans were coming to destroy the city, and they were supposed to look after each other because they knew the land was going to be worthless after the invasion. That's, again, has nothing to do with modern day Christianity. When God wanted to go about to bless the world, he gave first. He gave his only begotten son. He blessed us first. And by the goodness of God, that's what brings repentance. It's when we were at our worst, he gave us his best. How much more now shall he not give us all things freely? So that's kind of like my brief synopsis on the whole tithing thing. You'll never hear that in church. You'll never hear that on TBN or I don't even know what the other, God TV and all these other kinds of things. Yeah, it's a complete show. What do you think on that, Corey?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking about in the Old Testament, the original tithe had nothing to do with church upkeep, right? It was mostly
it was food.
Get some food, get some wine, and give it to the priests, right?
Yes, because
they need to eat too, right? And a lot of times, like, you weren't even supposed to give money unless you physically couldn't get there. Is what I remember.
To have a party. And invite the local priest, whoever your local guy was, to the party if you couldn't get it to the temple. Correct.
Yeah, and so you would have a party, and you could. And I think it said also if things are too heavy or you have too much of a tithe, you could sell it all and give it as money.
Yes.
But they didn't want that. That wasn't the default. The default was bring some food, bring some beer, and party it out with the priests, right?
That's it. That was the original tithe. And it's because the tribe of Levi, according to the law, were not allowed to work. So, it was built into the structure of the temple system that the other 11 tribes would take care of the tribe of Levi. So we don't have a temple today, right? And as
Pretty
Gentiles, we don't have tribes. At least we're not supposed to. So tough luck. It's kind of busted up.
So you can't even use the Bible examples because they have nothing to do with what we're talking about, in modern times where you have a bottom line and you try to stay afloat through, guilt tripping people, right?
Correct. If the first place that I saw Amos and I were both at a conference with the ministry he was involved with at the time. I think this was in Dallas at the time. And I remember being at that conference, and they took up as many offerings as it took to try and cover the expenses. So I remember there was one day, it was like there were offerings 10 minutes apart from each other. Like they took an offering and then he said something, obviously it wasn't enough, and they took another offering right then and there to try and cover the bills of this conference that they were doing.
Okay, that I don't remember actually.
Yeah, that was the Dallas conference. I remember that. It was because I was there with, a couple of the friends that we know, and they obviously did not take up enough for the first time, and they did it again like within maybe not 10 minutes, but like 15 minutes or whatever the case was. And I think that's kind of distasteful and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another level.
Oh, bro, no, the ultimate other level. I don't know if any of you guys have had this experience, and please share if you do. Again, I was at a conference and I was doing my ministry for free. I was volunteering as usual. And, the guy, one of it was kind of like a Benny Hinn associate. He wasn't Benny Hinn, but it was like somebody who kind of flowed with him back in the 80s sort of thing. So he came out to Trinidad and Tobago and they did the whole thing. Then they locked the doors, and the chief organizer basically said, I need 10 people to give, 10,000 TT dollars. Let's say about about 1,500 US each. That was kind of the equivalent. I need 10 people to give 1,500 US dollars each before we close this service today. And in a poor country, Trinidad and Tobago is a poor country, right? 1,500 US dollars. People don't make that in like a half a year sometimes. But he did it. He locked the door to make sure that this guy got an offering of, I don't even know how big it was, but in US dollars it was pretty substantial.
That'd be about 15. So I'm guessing he wanted to meet somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000.
Yeah, about 15 to 20,000, I think, is what he was going for.
Yeah,
and from very poor people.
How many people were in that service?
It wasn't. If we had 200, it was plenty. It was a very small service. It was not. I mean, a lot of the pastors came up and stuff like that, and they did the whole giving by faith sort of thing. But I'm very disheartened when I see those kinds of things, especially if they have meetings and it's like join the $100 prophecy line, the $1,000 prophecy line, the 10,000 prophecy line. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
I remember like some of the first commercials I saw coming out of a lot of this thinking and deconstructing, so to speak, coming out of that. And I see some like crazy, I remember, I think it was, it probably was like, if you want to say I got red pilled on the tithe.
Good man.
And watching and I was down in the Bible Belt, doing ministry, and I saw some of these videos and commercials and stuff on TV. If you give, and I swear, like this is because it was something with a 6, but it was like, if you gave $69 a month or whatever, you'd get 60. Now I'd be like, nice, but but it was just something like they would come up with some number, usually with tied to a verse. I mean, and I get donations and stuff. People always try to tie to something. Like everyone wants to do if you donate $20.20 to such and such a thing, this will we like this, that, and the other. And it's like it's a thing to get it's catchy. But it's like they would do that with Bible verses, So it's like if you donated $316 today towards our salvation fund, because John 3:16.
Yeah, I've seen that.
If you want somebody to believe in Jesus, give $316.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Is that the exchange rate? One life equals $316.
Well, not
one
even
salvation
that. It's
token.
like, we want to reach 316,000 people this year in Africa or something. It's probably something like that.
Yeah. That's messed up.
Or 31,060 or something. I don't even know.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Have you seen that, Corey? That kind of manipulation with the money and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, kind of all of it is, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But I was saying it in your example, is that like anointed kidnapping? If you're holding everybody hostage until they give you money, how is that not kidnapping?
Yeah.
By
I mean,
definition.
I think it is.
But hold on, it's kidnapping for Jesus. Come on.
It's reprehensible behavior, and especially in a lot of the Pentecostal environments and stuff like that's where you see a lot of this kind of thing. As I keep trying to tell everybody, the kingdom of God is free, right? Everything in the kingdom is free, right? God gave. It's they're not supposed to be stumbling blocks to get the things from the kingdom of heaven. Now, I understand if somebody writes a book and stuff like they put effort into, compiling their knowledge. You want to sell the book. I have no problem with that. That's voluntary. People can choose to buy the book and whatever, right? But this idea that you're going to put a stumbling block from the gift, like if you got prophecy or whatever the case might be, I think that's reprehensible. I think you're coming between, people and whatever God might want to say to them. So yeah, that's definitely nonsense. And just on a side note, when it comes to the money thing, Amos and I could attest to this, that I have seen ridiculous money miracles where like literally a stack of money materialized in somebody's pocket. Like, I was in the room with him. We were sharing, this hotel room. We were broke the night before. We wake up and he's got a stack of money that just showed up with like a banknote wrapped around it, kind of thing. Like insane. And I've seen that happen more than once. So I'm not disputing money miracles, but it was never as a result of, oh, well, he gave this and he tithed that or any of these different types of things. Everything has been free. That's kind of my sentiment.
Yeah, because I don't think when the disciples went fishing, they gave a tithe before they found their tax payment for the year, pretty much.
Who was it? It's Peter when he sent Peter to go fish.
Yeah, I don't think Peter was like, oh, let me stop at Temple quick and drop $1,
Yeah.
Make sure I prime the divine, floodgates of money.
Correct. And I mean, that is when you know if you really got the ministry, if you could be honest, for instance. So somebody that both Amos and I know, we worked with him in ministry and stuff like that. He's now got a building and he's always kind of, panhandling to get money to finish his building. And I kind of had the same issue with him and saying, look, once you get the building, you're stuck. You have to maintain the building. You got to be there. You got to have, he'd fly students in from all over the world and they'd live with him for a couple of weeks or months as the case might be. He used to do that in his house. Now he's got this building. Obviously, you got to upkeep that whole thing. And again, you go from giving away your gift for free and letting people voluntarily give to your ministry if they want, to now you've got to try and get them consistently giving. And it takes away the freedom.
For decades.
Yeah, for as long as
it's not even like, oh, we're having a hard year. Can you guys chip in? No, this is your life. This is your business model now. Right?
And that was a huge change, and I don't think it's necessarily any sort of theological thing. It's really just your motivations and priorities start to change when the money really becomes a bigger thing that you need to do. Like, unless you have some means of really making money that can, because like. He probably wouldn't admit that it's because of the money that he probably preaches the way he preaches now. Because I remember one of the first things with this person that Brook and I worked with, the first thing that happened after we kind of left, and we didn't even leave because of a money thing or anything. We left because of certain other theological differences. But one of the first things well, and then that was just a lot where a lot of my stories can be traced to. There was no money, but the story that kind of played out was we would come into contact with, this person through different people, or we would, want to try to reach out to talk or something, or, we'd be somewhere and he'd be somewhere and we'd try to meet up and stuff. And I mean, one of the first things that he would kind of oh, how are things going with the school and all this? And the first thing was, well, I'm getting a lot of students and I'm making this much money.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, hey, we're seeing great things in the field, miracles, people getting, healed, people getting saved, people getting anything. Like, the things that we felt really mattered, like actually helping people and reaching the lost, if you want to get all super, nice about it. But it's like, no, it was just, I'm getting students and I'm getting paid. Here's the dollar amount. And I was like, yeah, good for you, buddy. Like, so, like, what? Like, what does that mean then? And that's the focus. And I think it has a lot to do with, you have a vision in the beginning, but you pursue it, you try to get there too soon. Like, you sort of force the money out of the people to get there sooner. Like, say what you want about the church in general, but like one of the few instances I see this actually not being done this way, like, is there's a church that I was a part of that pretty much kind of part of like the beginning of it and starting it, and they still have a very small, fairly small congregation. They rent out a hotel, venue once a week, and the pastor works a second job.
Yeah.
That's been since 2011.
Yeah.
He hasn't, the congregation hasn't really grown really in any direction, really. There's, people are still generous because he preaches in a way of like freely giving, not in like, all right, times are tough this month, guys, so you got to give us a little more. It was, and yeah, he would never preach in any way to like try to get people to, more people to give. And the congregation hasn't grown, so there's no real stress, either way. And there are cases where I think, people actually will get there because they get a large benefactor, or they get a huge crowd of people that decide to show up more often and give. And maybe they do achieve some vision of like maintaining a building and all that. And I think that's fine. But there's people that sort of force that to happen, and then eventually get caught in a situation where they feel compelled to start preaching more about giving. And then they just, they're just a hair between, getting into the realm of having to give versus having the opportunity to give. They move slowly from freely give to give to be blessed. Like, we know the scripture. Well, I mean, I couldn't remember all of them, but I mean, if I heard them, it'd probably like, probably get some PTSD going. No, I'm just kidding. But it's like, the scriptures, like your prosperity gospel, your word of faith people would say certain scriptures. Your Baptist would say certain scriptures. There's always the one, what's that one in the book of Malachi?
Oh, how have you robbed God in his tithes and offerings?
No. There was one that they always gave that was like, tithing and offering, and he'll like
he'll return it pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. That one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that all refers to food. So
yeah, but it's like, how they interpret it to meet their, and even they would take certain scriptures and they become money-making scriptures.
Yeah.
Not even just ones about giving. Like, I remember there was one like, was it something comes by faith and faith by hearing?
Yeah, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God.
That's right. Mm-hmm. So the pastor that I remember preaching that basically said, well, if you look in the Greek, the word is, sort of a hearing, like a constant hearing.
Uh-huh.
So that was the justification of like the idea of like confessing scripture into your life.
Okay.
And the constant exposure to sermons and messages. And then that in turn turned to like an entire ministry where people would sell you these books full of like a handful of scriptures.
Money scriptures.
That you would confess like 10 times a day. It was basically Hail Mary, but more targeted. You you say your 10 scriptures a day of this, then you will get these miracles. Oh, say these until money starts flowing into your bank. Say these until you get healed. Say these until, you would fight depression. Well, if I say all these affirmation scriptures all day, I should be free from depression.
Right. That's yeah. Yeah.
One day I did all these confessing scriptures about healing because I was sick, and I had a bad dream one day, and I seriously thought I got because I was getting into the word and the devil sent a demon to try to fight me or whatever. You get all sorts of weird justifications because it gets so driven, but it's you create whole entire doctrines to start selling things that don't make sense. But yeah.
I mean, I was going to get into this, but Corey, have you seen anybody in the church, because of money, affect their doctrine? That was kind of where I was going with this.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the default of tithing and, name it, claim it shit as well, right? Yeah. Both of those revolve around money. And I think, and we were talking a little bit right before we went live about how much I hate the prosperity gospel.
Yes.
And even though he's hardcore Calvinist, I think John Piper is a very good resource on fighting that.
Right.
And he goes really deep into talking about what does it mean to actually be joyful, right?
Right.
And long suffering, right? Your job as a Christian really is to be really good at suffering, which is the exact opposite of all of the name it, claim it people where, oh, give me $1,000 and God will bless you with $10,000 and your life will be great. It's your best life now, right? And all that is such bull crap. And he talks specifically also about John Piper about the prosperity gospel going to Africa and third world countries, yes, and how that does even more damage than in Western civilization, because they're preaching to people if you give us money and believe in God with your whole heart, your pigs won't die and your crops won't fail and all of that kind of stuff. But it's not true, right? And so you have all these people donating all their money and time to those prosperity gospels in the third world countries, their actual all money, and hoping that it will help them in the slightest chance to be more survivable. But unfortunately, I'm sure there's still miracles going around about that. But in general, if you give away all your money and resources, your crops will die. Right?
Yes.
That's kind of how that works.
The whole thing too, that's interesting is while these people in these third world countries are giving and supporting local missionaries and such, they don't really tell you where that money goes. So then you get some anything from people trying to maintain, people are basically siphoning money from third world countries to maintain first world buildings and institutions. You also get some interesting stuff, and this gets into a whole nother thing. I don't know if you remember, Brook, when we started hearing about it going mainstream, when they were finding out that a lot of large ministries here in the U.S. were contributing to changing the laws in countries to favor certain
influence other countries.
Yeah, so there were some ministries involved with basically radically changing the legal system of Uganda to basically make Uganda's 80% Christian right now.
Yeah,
and which is pretty substantially it's a huge deal. I mean, compared to here, at least in the States.
Yeah.
And what had happened was you started getting these laws to make homosexuality
illegal,
criminally. You could criminally prosecute someone for that.
Yeah,
and
with a stone.
You could send them to jail and stuff. And what was happening was gays were, it was becoming very close to the Middle East. Granted, they weren't throwing people off roofs or anything, but there was just a lot of violence and
Stigma.
harassment towards gays and stuff. Yeah.
I remember that. And these international coalitions that go about trying to influence, other countries and stuff, it's kind of disturbing. And again, this is why I think there should be, I mean, it's hard to say, but I think when a church does their finances, there should be a bulk of it going back to help, I think, first the congregation. And, of course, you have the staff and whatever. And the building, all that maintenance should be like very low down on the list. If at all, they should be renting, to be quite frank. But if they're not, if like a certain percentage of the money is not going to help the congregation and not actually going back to people, that's when I think they should, they're probably more entitled to be taxed. And I mean, that's very controversial to hear from a libertarian Christian, but because a lot of it is, I'm sick and tired of seeing these very, very rich pastors living in these places, getting so off the backs of very, very poor people. And the money is not going to help. It's going for politics. It's going for these international influence groups. It's going for all sorts of things that have nothing to do with the Christian message and just the lives of everyday believers. And yeah, that's kind of why I feel that way about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember back when I was as a kid. I remember the whole thing was this pastor was trying to kind of be like, like a Kenneth Copeland of the area, and he actually bought himself a plane, and there was this whole video he did showing showing the congregation, this is what you're supporting. This is essentially to glorify God. And like this pastor would sit in this plane that he bought. It wasn't a private jet. It was like a small 1 or 2 man kind of plane. Yeah. And he had he would just go do some flying just honestly for fun. And he had this, I think there was some part of the video where he'd sit there and be like, I'm really feeling God's anointing here, like sitting in this plane. And I'll say this is actually an actual book. I remember this because it's like ingrained in my mind. There was a book that I remember my dad would read called Money Cometh.
Mm.
And it was like one of the first books that I heard about that was strictly just like, read this book and God's going to bless you with money.
Right.
And there were stories of this pastor who wrote this book, how he would sit in like a Cadillac and be like, the Lord is pleased. Like, what? The Lord is pleased because you get to sit in a nice car. Jeez, man, I should just go to I should go get myself a real nice car and just sit in and be like, the Lord is pleased. If you want to please the Lord, give me this car. Whatever, like.
Yeah, whenever somebody tells me tithing's going to please the Lord, I was like, nah, I'm just going to rent a Lambo.
Yeah.
For the Lord.
Have you ever heard of the term faith flopping?
What is it? Say it again.
So it's called faith flop.
Faith.
So what you do?
No.
So the faith flop was basically you would go on social media. This is when social media was just really kicking off, and you would say it was almost like a virtue signal and like calling attention to yourself, just this weird thing. But it was called the faith flop. So what I would do, what it would happen is I'd go on, let's say I go on Facebook and I'd be like, I'm really believing God for a new car. And someone would reach out to me and I would say, oh, God, God directed you to me. No, you went out there and put yourself out there hoping someone would reach out to you. But you use it under the guise of I'm believing for a car. I'm believing for this. And even like there were moments like this was a huge change in my family where like my dad and I had a lot of conversations about these things. And he said, it's funny. You see these stories where people are like, well, oh, this happened and God blessed me with business or with money, or, I got a good deal on something. And then you'll kind of like catch the tail end of the story. Someone was like, I was looking to buy a motorcycle, and, you know, I I found this great deal, and it was God ordained, and this guy was really needing money, so he gave me a huge discount. And I'm like, dude, that guy's running low on money, and you just like you're literally taking his situation, like taking advantage of his situation. But you're just gonna give it all to God and completely disregard the fact that you're opportunistically taking someone's like stuff. You're just like, oh, like, let's say it's like a $5,000 bike, but he's willing to part ways with it for $2,500 because he needs the money.
Yeah.
Like, that's $2,500 that guy doesn't have now.
But Amos, didn't God say he needed a motorcycle? Doesn't Jesus care if he has a motorcycle or not?
Yeah, and it's like, so they kind of play it like this, or I put it out there and God blessed me with this, and so yeah, it's not even just the money with pastors and ministries, but even just money between people. Like, there was a guy that I heard, and it was argued. My family was like, they thought I was like, definitely, like, something didn't feel right when I heard this. But basically, there was a guy who did like siding work, and he was a contractor, and he replaced siding on houses. And Minnesota is known for having times when, like, hailstorms and stuff and hail damage, and contractors make good money on that. And I'm not going to like take away and say, that you shouldn't be wanting to make money for whatever profession you're doing. But he basically praised God because a hailstorm destroyed, entire town house. So he had business to make money.
Oh man.
Thank you, Lord.
God uses all things together for my good.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here, I'm thinking like, okay, like there's a balance. Like, you can be a guy who does siding and you do work, and if hail damage happens, you do your work. Fine. You make your money how you do it. Like, there's, I met a guy once, that had nothing to do with ministry, but I met a guy who basically was an insurance adjuster. What he would do, he would just go out in the field and he would inspect damage for like really beat up houses. And I it was kind of odd because he was very open and honest with the fact that, oh yeah, I go and I inspect some pretty, beat up houses, and I make a ton of money off of it. And he goes, I love what I do. I'm thinking, you love going to see people's houses and telling them how much money they have to spend to repair everything? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, okay. I mean, at least he's honest.
It's an honest day's work.
Sit there and be like, God works through me as an insurance adjuster. It's like, no, it's your job. Like, there's moments when you can like glorify God by, living your life of purpose. But it's like, Jesus, you're not going to sit there and tell me like, God used a hailstorm to help me make money.
I mean, God could use anything, but this whole thing with God.
Don't turn it into
God
like
in the hail.
God just destroyed half a town's, siding. I mean, it's not like people lost their livelihoods, but it's just like now they have to, people with insurance and all this are calling, and someone has to come out and say, oh, okay, we're going to call these siding companies to come out and do the work for you. There's still a cost. There's still a headache involved. There's still some loss to the person. Like, for people that can afford it, fine. But, and you go do your job, you can be thankful that you get to make money, but don't turn it into a message that you're going to teach. And I mean, this is in my middle school ministry.
Yeah.
Talking about God using ways to like help me, be prosperous in my whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you could also say that through like employment, like, oh, God bless me with my dream job. Yeah, because the last guy just had a heart attack and now the position's open.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lord, for this blessing.
Oh, and he was in a sinful lifestyle, so
Yeah, God sends somebody to hell so you could get a better job, you know?
You need a squeakier, cleaner chair for you to sit at a desk at.
I mean, I know we're going to be opening it up pretty soon, but before we get into that, let's actually give some positive, maybe positive stories and our ideas about how Christians should go about approaching money, because a lot of Christians believe that money is the root of all evil, when the verse actually says it's the love of money that is the root of all evil. They think that, being poor and, taking a vow of poverty, for instance, somehow gets them closer to God. I don't know if anybody agrees with that. I personally don't agree with that, but let's kind of, lighten it up a little bit. So if anybody has any positive stories when it comes to money and, how to go about achieving it, or even if you've had some money miracles, I think we can share a little bit about that. So take it away. Corey, what do you say to that, man?
Honestly, I don't know if I have any. I would have to think about it. I've just seen the underbelly for way too many years that I don't know, man. I'll come back to me afterwards, and I could probably think of some.
No problem. Amos,
I mean,
what do you got,
the entire time I was in ministry in Dallas, I wasn't really given any money until the very end, and through generous givings from people, whether on the road or people from back home that knew about the ministry I was involved in. I think I tried doing the math on some of this stuff, and I realized like how little that I actually was getting paid per se.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I can sit here and say, well, I wasn't directly paid. There wasn't like a paycheck per se. There wasn't something, at least till the very end, just before I was leaving. They started giving us basically like a stipend. But even after that, even before that, I still managed to live a fairly comfortable life. Granted, I didn't have complete access. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a means to do a lot of things, but I was able to kind of basically live for like 6 months on my own.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it wasn't like, money materialized. It was just like, I don't know if, I know Brook knows this, but I don't know if Corey, if you've heard of a Pentecostal handshake.
Yeah, we call it a Holy Ghost handshake, but
right. Yeah. But basically, someone puts like a bill in your hand or something, and that's your blessing. And I've had instances where people were like saying, I remember I went on a trip. This is where Brook and I first met. Is when we went to a trip to Thailand, and like just the days leading up to me leaving, I had like people, feeling what was it? What's the term? An unction? Is that the word?
Unction is the word.
Yeah, they feel like a leading or an unction to like give or something. Or, one day there was a guy that I knew that told me he was coming to church, and he straight up just told me, yeah, I don't know why I was, he apparently he has a safe with cash in. He goes, I was going through the safe and I just felt this feeling I should take out $100 bill and just give it to you. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I think you just, give a crap, but okay, say God did it. And that's, I mean, I think to a degree I believe like God can move on people to like do things, but I think when it comes down to it, it almost kind of takes away from their ability to just be generous.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you really need God to tell you to be generous?
Sometimes they do.
I mean, yes and no. It's like, but it's almost like that's a whole nother topic, is like, do you need the Bible and religion to be moral, to be generous?
Right.
Maybe you just care, but your mind is so conditioned to just think, oh, God wanted me to do this. Otherwise, I'd be selfish. Okay, whatever helps you sleep. I mean, I think you just care about certain things. Like, I was going to Thailand and doing, granted it was typical ministry kind of stuff. We weren't doing any like specific goodwill per se in the like the tangible sense. We were just speaking and praying for people. But, still, it's like, oh, God has to tell you to give. God has to send a hailstorm for you to make money. God has trying not to keep it too negative, but like it's like
no, we're trying to be positive, Amos. We're trying to do the.
I know we're trying to be positive.
It's so hard. It's
money can be really hard to be positive about with the church. It's like, someone like feels they want to give, but you're still kind of like, really?
Yeah, I think there is a lot more horror story than positive. I mean, as I say, I shared the video in the chat with the money miracle with the guy who got the stack of money. I remember personally, I got into a car accident where I had to, technically I was in the wrong. Sorry, the guy was in the wrong, but I offered to pay. Just, I don't know why I offered to pay. I was a young kid. I didn't have any money. I wasn't working at the time. And just that afternoon, I had a meeting with, this one person, and they gave me like $800 out of the blue, and I was able to pay this guy to like fix his car. A lot of strange, like unforeseen coincidences. I've never had any money manifest personally for me, which is pissing me off because, that would be so cool. I've seen it happen a couple of times.
Yeah,
maybe just because you're not living your best life now, Brook.
I know,
right?
I know. It's absolute nonsense, man. I haven't, in terms of things that I've wanted, I have had some interesting experiences. Even this place that I'm staying at right now, for want of a better word, in terms of unction or leading or something like that. I don't buy too much into that because I believe God trusts his spirit in us to make good decisions. And he'll kind of stop us when we're going in the wrong direction. So you might feel some hesitation. And I was looking at a number of places, and then I finally kind of zeroed in on this one. And I didn't necessarily get a hesitation with the others, but I definitely felt peace. I definitely felt like this is very comfortable. And when I got here, I just loved the town. And so I went with a feeling of peace, if anything else. It wasn't any kind of major thing. And the decision was ultimately economic because it's probably one of the cheapest places in the country to live. But I would definitely say, I definitely felt like, okay, that was a good feeling. Like I felt comfortable. I don't want to discourage people because I do know these things do happen. So,
by the way, I got one. I thought of a story.
About to put it back to you, Corey. What do you got for us, man?
Okay, so it's a little bit bittersweet. It's kind of both, but this is the best I could do because the shitty position I was put in was by the church structure that I was working for at the time. Yes. And so when I was working at one of those extreme air quotes internship jobs, they had housing on property that you actually lived where you worked, right?
Yeah.
And it was a behavioral and mental health boarding school for Christian teenagers, essentially. And so upstairs was the kids actually lived with all of the locks and all of that stuff and all the security. And then under it, in a completely identical mirrored way of the same type of dorms and bathrooms and everything, is where the employees lived. And so they would just keep the downstairs locked, and you needed your key card or whatever to get in and out, but you would live there kind of thing. So I was living there for the job with like 12 other people. And out of nowhere, they just said, okay, well, one of these rooms needs to be an office. We hired a lot of people. So you all have 5 days to move out.
Wow. Okay.
And so they kicked us all out on a 5 days notice saying, you need to find a place to live because we need to use these bedrooms for offices now. And so that was the crappy part. And so I was like, oh, crap. So I crashed at my dad's place for a week looking for a place to stay. You know what I mean? Trying to find a place to live. And obviously they weren't paying us jack crap money, And so that made it even harder on top of now I'm a hobo. And so literally on the 5th day before we got kicked out, I found a Craigslist posting of an apartment that was not super affordable, but just affordable enough.
Yes.
And then I was like, so I called them up, and it turns out that it's only for old people. Like everybody there is 60 or older. And it was like a series of, quadruplexes, fourplexes. And I was like, oh crap, that sucks. But he saw my name as my last name. And he's like, oh, are you related to Mike? The cop? And I go, yeah, my grandpa Mike was a cop in Kansas City. And he goes, "Oh, he was a like a veteran when I was a newbie, and this guy was from the same police district and just retired, and now this is his retirement plan is to own all of these houses, and upkeep them, and like that's kind of where he put all his retirement money in." He's like, "Oh, cool, man. Yeah, you can come in."
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, and I didn't have to put any like down payment or security deposit. He just said, just pay me rent first of the month with a check, and you're good. So that was an extreme blessing, last second, thing that probably shouldn't have happened, but did. But yeah, it's bittersweet because my Christian organization is the one that put me in the shit in the first place. Yeah, on a 5 days notice, you have to move out with no money and live somewhere, but still work here.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's a good story though. Oh, we got Tom. We got Tom in the background. I thought he couldn't join us. Tom, I thought you couldn't join us, man. What's going on?
I can join you guys.
What's going on, bro? You doing all right?
Doing great. How are you?
Good.
All right. Here's my story. Like 2 or 3 years ago, I got burned out of this Benny Hinn type ministry, and yeah, very similar to you guys. Just imagine everything y'all said. Same thing.
Yeah, I've seen the Benny Hinn stuff up close.
Yeah. I mean, it's predatory. And then I ended up saying, I'm going to start my own ministry, kind of like Brook, but I don't have I don't have my name on a YouTube channel, but I start Ubering, and Uber is a complete shit job, so I end up living out of my car.
Wow.
Yep. And at some point, I was also getting into like political stuff, so I had a username alt-right Christian on Twitter, which is defunct, since defunct.
That was the Milo Yiannopoulos alt-right, not the present day alt-right, was it?
Richard Spencer.
Yeah.
The Richard Spencer, right? I think Milo Yiannopoulos coined it first as like alternative Republican, and Richard Spencer co-opted it and turned it into something else.
Yeah. White nationalism.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, thank you. So that's what it was. And anyway, but some guy started reading my blog, and he ended up giving me $500.
Wow.
Which I consider like this is a great gift from God helping me out. But it turned out later I realized, because he wanted to meet with me, I realized like this man is gay.
Oh, he wanted to give you a different gift.
Yes.
He was grooming you. Good old fashioned grooming.
Grooming me. And I was like, oh, it's the Lord.
You still got the money though, it's not all bad.
No. It's just crazy, it's just you can I don't want to like counter signal you guys, but there's definitely shades of how God works through these things.
Yes.
I'm glad I got my $500 gay dollars, but it's cringy to think about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what man uses for evil, God uses for good, right? In Genesis.
Correct.
So,
yeah,
that's good. Not saying that guy's evil, but it was clearly obvious he had false pretenses on his donation, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's a good story though. That's a good story. I mean,
thank you. I don't know if I have a positive. I mean, there are positive ones. Like the I like that manifesting one. I have a man in my church who he lost a hamster, and this is not about money, but basically,
not when you start with a hamster. No, it's
this is a deep dive right here. Hamster gospel.
I mean, it might have been an expensive hamster, but let me just. What happened was he was lying in bed, and the hamster like teleported into his hand after they prayed to find it.
Right.
And I fucking love teleportation. Those are real. There are real teleportation stories.
Yeah, I've experienced that.
That's awesome, man. I mean, that's what keeps you alive. For me, it's like, there's so much bullshit when it comes to just people talking and more talking. It's like, no, something fucking teleported here. Even the true gold teeth miracles. There are legit gold teeth miracles. There is legit gold dust you know, like C.S. Lewis says, the counterfeits point towards the real. Like that shit keeps me alive sometimes when there's just all this other bullshit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been to Puerto Rico where they had a church that had all of that kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And then I've been to places where I've seen the pastor drop in the gemstones on the ground. So I've seen kind of both sides to it. Yeah, the money manifestation thing. I know somebody personally. She lost her wedding ring running through the airport, and it dropped. You know, just kind of slid off her finger and rolled off. And she was late for the flight, so she just said like, you know, God, I send your angels after it or whatever it was. And she took the flight. Ended up in, I think she was going from America to Germany. Ended up in the hotel room, and her wedding ring was on the counter waiting for her in the hotel room. And you know, as she opens the door, it's right there. So I don't dispute that those things do happen. It's very difficult to teach it because it's unpredictable, right? A miracle by definition is unpredictable. But yeah, I would never discourage anybody to expect those types of things.
It gets frustrating when there's not consistency, you know. Very frustrating.
I mean, that's pretty much why I left a lot of that kind of healing ministry and other things is the inconsistency. I can't build my life on something that inconsistent. So I stick to teaching. I stick to understanding scripture to try and set believers free. I still do the miracles. I still pray for people. I you know, people with pain and all kinds of stuff. But that's never been my focus because I can't build a foundation on something that's kind of here or there.
Yeah, I think there's a distinction between the miracles are like one shots, and then people do have giftings. There are giftings that people have even in healing.
We could do a show about gifts and anointings and mantles and all that good stuff.
That'd be good.
I mean, Amos, do you want to chime in on any of that? I mean, because you've kind of moved away from the miraculous as well to a degree.
What do you mean? Like,
I mean, you're kind of like me. You're not really pushing that side of it. I mean, you've seen some pretty crazy things.
Yeah, I mean, I basically go about it as if people want me to pray about something or pray for something, I'll definitely do it.
But
I don't actively pursue anything. I mean, it's kind of comes and goes depending upon, you know, what's going on, but
depending on if the spirit leads, right? You know.
Yeah, there's that, but I mean, it's there's a lot going on with that I could get into with that, but that'd be a whole nother show.
We'll do a show about miracles. Yeah, definitely.
Well, the praying thing, I had to be like, it was a time in my life when I was praying for people a lot, and it's kind of like going to the gym or different things. Like you have to kind of be in that mindset. It has to be a program that's kind of running, or you're not going to do it.
Yeah. I think you do get to a point where it's just natural. So I don't need any kind of build up to do it now. I just you know, because I've built myself up to that point, I could do it anywhere.
True.
You know, yeah. So we could definitely do a show about manifestations and miracles. I mean, Corey, do you have any like miracle stuff that you've witnessed in the church? And I mean, have you delved in that at all?
I've seen a lot of fake ones.
I
don't know if those count, but there was a couple, but they were on like it seems to always happen, you know, when you're out of, you're like, if you're doing gas.
Right.
And they didn't, and we weren't near anywhere, and it was going to cost, you know, $1,000 or more to go get a tow truck and tow it to a gas station and all of that. So they actually filled the gas tank with water and prayed over it, and we got there. Which is pretty freaking nuts. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and like I still always try to question it. Like, did somebody just like do the slip and like it was gas and they were just trying to do something or not? But I mean, I don't know, man. It was weird. It was definitely a trippy experience. There was also a lot of like that was in Panama.
Damn.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff where like there was one time one of the villagers came to us while we were working and said that their baby's choking and they don't know what to do. And then they went over and like one of the ladies there was like, first aid certified and was starting to do like the baby CPR, choking, Heimlich maneuver type stuff. And it wasn't working, and the baby was freaking out, and the mom was freaking out. And so they did it again, but this time while praying, and it dislodged in like half a second instantly. So I don't know if we want to count that one technically as a miracle or not either, but it was definitely interesting to see. Yeah. But it was crazy. But I forgot, there was one example I really wanted to bring up when it regards to money in the church that Tom's thing reminded me of. He's talking about, using the unjust wealth, right? And that's also in the parable of the shrewd manager.
The wicked is laid up for the just.
The wealth of the gay man.
Yeah, exactly.
But in college, I had a very interesting class with a professor named Rick McPeak, who pretty much was like the kingpin of that little small town Bible community, where like he owned half of the houses in the city. And he was like a tenured professor there, and he could do whatever he wanted. And so in your senior year, you get to take a lot of his classes, which is literally do whatever the fuck you want. It's awesome. Nice. Because he's like super open, honest. He's like the good, benevolent godfather of that thing. And we started talking a lot about money and power, because he was really into power dynamics. And this was during Ferguson. We all went to Ferguson as a group for my class and went and talked to all the community leaders and stuff. So I originally did all that because I talked about it before through his group. But he had a traveling minister come visit us, and we had like a 2-hour sit down with him. And he has a church in Africa, and his job to fund the church instead of taking donations is he sells tobacco for the mafia. And he has normal crops, but he also has tobacco crop that he sells directly to like the African mafia. That's cool. So they approached him with it, and he was talking about, he was freaking out about it. He's like, oh crap, I'm going to get like hit like The Godfather or like Sopranos or something like that. And that's what it was. It was just the African like gang warlord mafia version of that. And they approached him saying, hey, we want you to start selling this, and we'll give you a cut of it. And he prayed about it, and he thinks God wanted him to do it. So he now grows and sells to the mafia illegal tobacco, and that's how he funds his church.
He's a literal godfather,
Yeah, it was freaking awesome, man. That guy was cool. And he was this little, like 5'6", like 60-year-old guy that looks kind of like a 5'6" trucker that lives in Africa and grows tobacco for the mafia. Yeah, and I was like, that's the coolest pastor I've ever heard of.
In fact, when I was deciding on the show this week, I'll definitely do it for the next cycle on mine. I want to do one on like drugs and alcohol in the church and the history of drugs and alcohol in the church. It's not as clear as people might actually think. It's actually pretty sexy.
I mean, I'm doing drugs right now. I'm doing some nicotine and caffeine, right?
Bro, you know I've done a couple mushroom trips, Brian. But we will definitely do that on either on one of the other cycles and stuff like that. But hey, Tom, man, we're going to be winding it down. Always good to see you, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, have a good one, man. We'll see you probably in the next show, and definitely online.
Sounds good.
Take care, bro.
Bye.
So, gentlemen, we're coming down to the wire. Final thoughts. Corey, take us into your final thoughts.
Oh, boy. So we definitely dissected the whole church aspect. So maybe sometime in the future we could do the part 2, because there are some interesting verses to talk about it on the personal level of money. Like we talk about the god of mammon, or what does it mean that it's hard? Yeah, it's hard for a rich man to enter heaven. Yes. I would love to know about how all those apply to Christianity and hash that out. So I think that would be a cool part 2 sometime in the future.
Yeah. Whose channel are we going to next? Is it yours?
Yeah, I think it's mine.
So if you want to do the part 2, I'm totally down for that.
Possibly. I might have my special guest, socialist Christian friend. He said he's interested, so we'll see if he can do next week or not.
That would be pretty cool.
So that'll be interesting. But yeah, that'll be a very hot fire topic because he very much likes debate and yelling. So it'll be fun. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just waiting on my house, which is a financial investment on my half. So
good man. We're
so
praying,
that's my
praying
skin in
for
the
you,
game.
thoughts and prayers that everything goes well.
Oh yeah.
Amos,
Blessed.
man, take us home with your final thoughts, my friend.
Make as much money as you want. Don't give a fuck if God wants you to have it or not.
Are you condoning working for the mafia and like Breaking Bad? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, scripture gets so twisted and all over the place in so many different ways. Like, people will justify anything. I remember, like, there was this scripture. No, there was like this, get confessions and, speaking over your life type stuff. And it was basically like, whatever you do, like, say this thing. And let's just say a pastor's kid once, like, got so free from that sort of indoctrination about just the whole confessing over your life, speaking all this stuff into existence and all this, basically kind of was like, someone's going to be taking that and be doing like a gay porn shoot and just be like, as long as I can make this confession. It was something along the lines of like, I have the ability to like do something so extraordinarily in my life, for the glory of God or something.
Yeah.
But it was worded in a way that is almost sounded like scripture. And it was like, oh, say this over anything you do in your life and you'll do it like, gloriously for the glory of God kind of thing. And like, he was just joking, like, really? You're going to go tell some kid that's going to be like, getting into some pretty debaucherous nonsense for money, and he's just going to do that for the glory of God? And
sounds sexy. That's definitely a great closing thought. Gay porn is always a good way to close the show.
Amen.
I think God
Amen.
cares and doesn't care. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. Yeah.
People are going to do what people are going to do, and maybe that's a whole nother episode too, the sovereignty of God.
Yeah. That would be a very good questioning. Is God in that or not in that sort of thing? But yeah, we can.
How much does God give a shit?
The answer is usually nil.
Yeah. He's got. Anyway, we'll definitely do that for another show. So, gentlemen, my final thoughts on this. Yes, there's a lot of scams when it comes out there to money and power. So it's interesting that we did the power conversation. Now we're kind of touching on the money. Hopefully that'll be a conversation that continues. And yeah, we've pointed out a lot of, the dark sides of it. So people, please have some wisdom. Don't believe this idea that, you got to give to get something from God. God is not a divine slot machine. He's not, you put in your tokens, pull the lever, and hopefully you get a blessing. He when we could give him nothing, he gave us his son. He gave us his best. All things he gave us now are for free because he's a good father. Fathers do not put stumbling blocks in front of their kids, when they're expressing love. So I would say use that as a piece of wisdom. And yes, miracles do happen, as much as we're kind of shitting on the church and being a little pessimistic, do the work. Don't just wait for manna from heaven. That was actually part of the punishment of the children of Israel. Everybody's like waiting for manna from heaven when that really wasn't God's best. God's best for them was for them to possess the land that was flowing with milk and honey. So go out and possess the land, whatever that looks like. Do the work. And if God blesses you with something supernatural before that, praise God. Amen. I think that's even better. So, gentlemen, that would be it. Next week, we're going to be on Conk's channel. Links will be in the description below. Leave comments. Be sure to like, share, subscribe if you'd like to see more. And we'd just like to say thank you for watching. God bless, and we will see you all next week.